It was a slow Tuesday in Lakefield, the kind of town where the biggest crime most weeks was a stolen bike or a neighbor's trash bin complaint. The local supermarket sat quiet, aisles wide and half empty, the overhead lights humming like they had something to say but never would. Sergeant Ben Carter strolled down aisle 9 with his canine partner, Ranger, a seasoned German shepherd with a coat like storm clouds and eyes that missed nothing. Most days, their job here was a gesture of presence. Smile at kids, wave to clerks, nod to retirees. Presence prevented problems, or so the logic went. But halfway down the cereal aisle, Ranger stopped. No bark, no growl, just a sudden halt. His ears pricked forward, body stiff, head tilted slightly, staring. Ben paused, looked down at Ranger, then followed his gaze. There she was, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, stood between two shelves stacked with Cheerios and Fruit Loops. Blonde hair tangled, dress pink, but stained. She clutched a worn-out teddy bear like it was oxygen. And then her other hand moved. A small gesture, almost nothing. But Ben saw it. Ranger saw it first, palm out, thumb tucked in, fingers slowly folded over. Ben's chest tightened. He'd seen the signal in a training seminar about domestic violence response, used mostly by kids, sometimes by women. A subtle call for help without alerting the person beside them. A modern distress flare, quiet and almost always overlooked. The girl didn't make eye contact. She just stood there, frozen, her hand slipping back down to her side as a tall man walked toward her, holding a box of cereal. "Come on, Emma," the man said softly, his voice unnervingly calm. He placed a hand on her shoulder. She flinched, didn't speak, just tightened her hold on the teddy bear. Ranger gave a low, almost inaudible whine. Ben straightened. Something in the air shifted. Instinct and training both pulled at him, but his badge had boundaries. The man hadn't done anything illegal. The girl hadn't said a word. And yet, the man glanced their way, nodding casually. "Afternoon, officer," he said, smiling like he had nothing to hide. Ben nodded back, neutral. "Everything all right today?" The man's smile held. "Just doing some shopping." "Cute bear," Ben offered, eyes flicking to the girl. The girl looked up briefly, enough for Ben to see the fear behind her blank expression. The man guided her towards the registers. As they passed, Ranger didn't move. Didn't follow. Just turned his head slowly, tracking the girl until she was out of view. Ben stared after them, jaw tight. Outside, the man loaded a couple of bags into the trunk of a faded blue sedan. The girl climbed in silently. No car seat, no interaction, just motion. Ben and Ranger stood at the sliding doors, watching. "You saw it too, didn't you?" Ben muttered. Ranger's tail was stiff, his eyes locked on the departing car. Ben's hand went to his radio, paused. The rational side of him screamed, "Wait, don't jump to conclusions." But Ranger didn't freeze without reason, and that girl didn't make that gesture by accident. The sedan rolled out of the lot. Ranger didn't move. Ben made a decision. "Let's go," he said, already heading for the patrol car. Ranger jumped into the passenger seat with the ease of repetition, but his posture was different, alert, sharp, ready. Like this was no longer just another Tuesday. Like he knew what was at stake. Ben turned the ignition. The engine rumbled to life. They pulled out, 3 cars behind the blue sedan. No sirens, no lights, just quiet pursuit. He didn't know who the girl was. He didn't know what the man had done. Or hadn't done. All he knew was the way Ranger froze. And that was enough. For now, Lakefield wasn't where Sergeant Ben Carter thought he'd end up. 5 years ago, he was running major casework for the Metro Department in Raleigh, homicides, trafficking, missing persons. He lived in courtrooms and crime scenes, chased ghosts and monsters. He was good at it. Some even said brilliant. But brilliance didn't keep the nightmares out. Then Emily died. A car ran a red light, no warning, no time. Gone. Ben cracked. He held it together long enough to bury her, pack the house, and put in for transfer. He didn't want glory anymore. He didn't want headlines. He wanted quiet. Something small, something numb. Lakefield, population under 8,000, offered numbness in spades. No murders in over a decade. Maybe 2. The biggest stories were about the high school's football team and who baked the best pecan pie at the summer fair. But then came Ranger. They assigned the K9 to Ben 6 weeks after his transfer. Officially, Ranger was a dual-purpose working dog, trained in narcotics detection and human tracking. Unofficially, he was a lifeline. Ben didn't want a partner. He didn't want conversation. He wanted silence. Ranger gave him that, but not the kind of silence that lets you disappear, the kind that says, "I'm here and I see you, even if you don't speak." Ranger wasn't loud. He didn't jump at people, didn't bark unless he had to. He observed. He learned. He waited. Just like Ben. The department saw it as a win. 1 broken man and 1 perfect dog. But they didn't understand how fast the bond grew, how Ranger started sleeping by the front door like he'd always been there, how the nightmares stopped when Ranger curled up at Ben's feet, how Ranger never once walked away when Ben broke down quietly in the middle of the night, with nothing but guilt and old grief clawing at his ribs. There were mornings when Ben didn't even speak. Ranger just tilted his head, then walked over and pressed his body against him like a wall. And somehow, Ben stood up. Now, almost 2 years into their partnership, they moved like one. A shift of the leash, a flick of the ear. They didn't need commands anymore. Ranger knew when Ben was about to turn. Ben knew when Ranger picked up a scent. Words were optional. That's what made today different. Ben couldn't shake the girl's face. That tiny hand gesture, the stiffness in her shoulders, the too clean silence. He knew what trauma looked like in adults. But in kids it was different. Softer. More fragile. Easy to dismiss. Ranger didn't dismiss it. After they lost the blue sedan in traffic, Ben had doubled back to the grocery store. He asked to see the security footage, but the angles were off. No clear view of the gesture. The man didn't show aggression, no shoplifting, no threats. Just a quiet shopper with a quiet kid. But Ranger had planted himself in front of the exit like a statue. The way he stared as the car pulled away. It stayed with Ben. Not protective, not hostile, just resolute. Like he knew something had already started. Back at the station, Ben sat at his desk longer than usual. He stared at a blank incident report. He didn't know what to write. Dog sensed bad vibe wouldn't hold up. Little girl made maybe signal with her hand wasn't actionable. It would be laughed off. He didn't file the report. He went home. That night, Ranger curled up beside the couch while Ben nursed a beer he didn't want and a headache he couldn't explain. Outside, wind shook the pine trees. Inside, silence hovered. Ranger lifted his head once, stared at the window, then put it down again. "You saw something I didn't," Ben said softly. Ranger didn't move. "You ever been wrong before?" A flick of the ear. Ben set the beer down, walked to the fridge, taped a note to the door with a magnet shaped like a fish. The note read, "Follow it." The next morning, Ben rose early. Too early for a patrol shift. He sat at the table with black coffee and half a granola bar. Ranger sat in the doorway, tail brushing the floor, eyes alert. "You ready?" Ben asked. Ranger stood up. They drove the route from the day before. Past the gas station, past the elementary school, past the bakery where the smell of sugar-glazed donuts would normally distract them both. No distractions today. When they reached the apartment complex, Sunset Ridge, beige paint flaking from sun exposure, Ben pulled over across the street. Watched, waited. There it was. Same blue sedan, parked crooked, tires worn. A second-floor window half covered by a broken blind. No movement, no sound. Ranger leaned forward, resting his paws on the dashboard. Ears forward. Focused. Ben tapped the steering wheel. "Okay," he muttered. "We're in this now." But just as he reached for the door, a tap on the window made him jump. It was Officer Julie McNair, a rookie on bike patrol who'd been shadowing Ben the past few weeks. She was supposed to be off duty. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Ben raised a brow. "I could ask the same." She hesitated. "I live 2 blocks down, saw your car, thought maybe something was going on." Ben studied her face. She meant well, smart, observant, still green. He gestured to the building. "Saw something yesterday. Nothing illegal, just off. Kid." He nodded. "Want backup?" Ben almost declined. Then he glanced at Ranger. The dog was still watching that same window. "Yeah," Ben said. "Might be nothing, but if it's something, I'd rather not find out too late." They didn't knock on the door yet. Just watched. Ranger didn't move, didn't blink. Ben didn't need confirmation. He had it. From the beginning, Ranger knew. And Ben? He was just catching up. The girl's name was Emma. That much Ben had managed to learn from a loose grocery bag tag the man dropped and didn't bother picking up. A laminated school badge tucked in a sleeve. Emma, age 6 inches handwritten in faded Sharpie. No last name, no emergency contact. Just Emma. She hadn't spoken once. They'd followed the blue sedan for 3 blocks the day before. Ben had kept enough distance to avoid suspicion, but traffic worked against him. A red light, a slow-moving delivery truck, then a sudden turn off Maple Avenue, and the car was gone. Now he was parked across from the complex where he'd last seen it. Sunset Ridge. Low-income housing on the edge of town, rusted mailboxes, laundry drying from railings, a busted tricycle tipped over in a patch of dead grass. Ben had driven by slowly again this morning, and there it was. Same sedan, same crooked parking job, same building, Unit 2B. Ranger had known before he'd even seen it. The dog's posture changed the moment they turned onto the street. His head rose, nostrils flared, tail stiff. Not aggressive, not excited, just locked in, hyper-attuned. Ben didn't move. Not yet. From the patrol car, he watched as a man stepped out of the complex around 8:10 a.m. Tall, late 40s, maybe early 50s. Wore a faded hoodie and jeans. No visible aggression, no paranoia. But there was a tension in his shoulders, a stillness in the way he moved that didn't match the neighborhood's lazy rhythm. He carried a trash bag in one hand, a phone in the other. Ben noted the details. Every second counted. If something was off, it wouldn't be loud, it would be buried in the ordinary. The man's name, as he would later learn, was Travis Beckett. No priors, no active warrants, clean on paper. But Ranger wouldn't stop staring at the second-floor window. Ben radioed in. Kept it casual. "Dispatch, this is Carter. I'm across from Sunset Ridge, visual on a unit of interest. No cause for entry at this time, just requesting prior incidents at this address. Over." Static crackled. "Copy, Carter. Checking now. No current complaints or child services calls at that location. You need backup?" Ben looked at Ranger. The dog hadn't blinked. "Negative. Just logging presence. Continuing observation." He ended the call. Ranger's stare was unwavering. Ben had seen him like this maybe 3 times before. Once at the scene of a missing girl who'd been locked in a shed behind a vacant property. Another time when an abuser had hidden meth behind his child's toy chest. Each time, Ranger knew before anyone else did. It was like his body recognized suffering even when the mind couldn't. At 10:32 a.m., Ben finally got out of the car and walked casually toward the building. Ranger at heel, not pulling, just moving with eerie control. Together, they made their way to the edge of the parking lot. No movement inside, then a curtain shifted. The girl, Emma. She peeked through the cracked blind. Just a glimpse of blonde hair and that same bear in her arms. Ben froze. So did Ranger. There, in the low morning light, barely visible. The hand, palm out, thumb tucked in, fingers curled, again. A second time wasn't a mistake. Ben whispered, "You saw it again, huh?" Ranger sat slowly, his entire body tight, not tense, but coiled, like every muscle was waiting for something. Ben backed away and returned to the car. He didn't want to spook them. He had to think. Act too soon, and he risked losing everything. Act too late, and he'd never forgive himself. He reviewed the footage from his patrol dashcam, zoomed in, watched the building again. Still too far for clarity. The signal barely visible, a whisper of a cry for help. He ran the plates on the sedan, registered to Travis Beckett. No violations, no red flags. He checked local school records. No Emma Beckett enrolled. No Monroe, no aliases he could think of. Either she was too new to the area or never enrolled at all. Ben reached for the phone. "Child Protective Services, how may I direct your call?" He hesitated. I'm not sure I have enough yet, but I think there's a girl who might be in danger. Do you have immediate proof of abuse or neglect, officer? No, he said truthfully, but my K9 picked up on something, twice now, and the child used a known distress signal both times. Silence. I can pass your concern to an intake specialist, but without direct evidence or complaint, a welfare check might take time. Time wasn't something he wanted to gamble. Ranger paced once, circled back, sat down again. His eyes were still on the window, still on the invisible thread that bound him to the girl. Ben whispered, "We need another way in." That evening, off duty, he returned to the area out of uniform. Hoodie, jeans, coffee in hand. Ranger sat beside him in the passenger seat, no vest, no harness, just dog and man. Ben walked the block, talked to locals, chatted at the laundromat. And there, between folding tables, he caught a voice. "I saw her," an older woman said to her friend. Little girl with the teddy bear. Didn't say a word, just sat there while that man washed clothes. That was yesterday. Late afternoon. He looked like a dad. The first woman paused. He looked like someone who doesn't know what to do with kids. Ben approached slowly. "Excuse me, Mom. Sorry to interrupt. I'm with Lakefield PD, off duty today. Can you describe the girl?" The women hesitated, then nodded. One even drew a little flower on her napkin while talking. It matched the print on the dress Emma wore in the grocery store. Ranger pressed his nose against the glass door, waiting. Ben turned to him. "We're not crazy." Ranger didn't blink. They stayed parked at the corner for another hour that night. Nothing stirred. No lights in 2B. No movement. But just before they left, the curtain shifted again. And for one fleeting second, Emma's eyes found Ranger's. She didn't wave. She didn't cry. She just looked. And Ranger, with that stillness that said more than words ever could, sat taller, ears forward, and didn't look away. Ben knew right then. They weren't done. They were only beginning. Back at the precinct, Ben Carter sat across from Sergeant Lila Harmon in the tiny report review room, fingers tapping the file in front of him. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting a sterile, hollow glow over the beige walls and steel cabinets. It smelled faintly of old paper and stronger coffee. "I need a welfare check on a kid in Unit 2B at Sunset Ridge," Ben said. Harmon looked up from her laptop. What do we have? Ben hesitated, then laid it out. The girl, the man, the silent distress signal, Ranger's locked-in behavior, the unmatched stare, the way Emma's body language screamed one thing even when her mouth said nothing. And you didn't see any physical signs of harm? Harmon asked, eyes narrowing in a way Ben had come to recognize. Not dismissive, just bound by policy. No bruises, Ben said. But her eyes, they weren't just blank, they were detached, like she wasn't inside herself anymore. And Ranger. Twice now. Both times he reacted before I even registered anything. Froze in place. Wouldn't budge. He's only done that when something's seriously wrong. Harmon gave a slow nod. She respected Ranger. Everyone in the department did. He had a reputation, sharp, calm, never dramatic. But there was no checkbox on the incident report for gut instinct from a dog. She sighed. Okay, did you catch the distress gesture on your dash cam? Barely. I tried zooming in, but the angle's off. Grainy, it's a blink and you miss it kind of moment. She turned her screen toward him. I can log the interaction, flag the address, maybe get someone from CPS to swing by in a few days. A few days? Ben echoed. Lila folded her hands. Ben, you know how this works. No bruises, no screaming, no prior reports. We're working with shadows here. You want to kick down a door based on a kid's hand twitch and a dog's stare? He clenched his jaw. I don't want to wait until that girl shows up in a hospital bed. And I don't want to file a lawsuit because we acted on a hunch. Ben stood abruptly, pushing back his chair. It's not a hunch. It's Ranger. Lila's tone softened. Then watch. Log everything. Be smart about it. If something's really wrong, it'll crack open. You just have to be patient. But patience felt too much like doing nothing. Ben didn't go home that night. He and Ranger cruised past Sunset Ridge twice. No movement. No lights in 2B. The curtains stayed closed. The blue sedan hadn't moved. By 10 p.m., Ben gave in and pulled into Maria's diner on Oak Street, one of the only places still open. It was mostly empty except for the clink of dishes and a soft country ballad playing over the speakers. He took the back booth, Ranger settling at his feet without command. He didn't beg. Didn't scan. Just rested his head on Ben's boot, still alert. You look like a man carrying too many ghosts, Maria said as she poured his coffee. She always said it straight, always saw more than she let on. Something like that. Ben muttered, wrapping his hands around the mug like it could anchor him. Maria moved on, but two women in the next booth were mid-conversation. Older, maybe in their 70s. They weren't whispering, but they weren't loud either. She was sitting right there on the folding bench at Suds and Spin yesterday. One of them said, tapping her nail on her glass. Little blonde thing. Just still. Holding that ratty teddy bear like it was the only thing left in the world. The man she was with didn't even talk to her. The other replied. Just washed his clothes and left. Didn't even look at her, not once. Ben's heart picked up. He leaned back, tried to keep his voice neutral. Sorry to interrupt. Did you say a laundromat? A little girl? They looked at him cautiously. One nodded. She didn't look right. Not hurt, exactly, just empty. Ranger stirred slightly. Ben pulled out his phone, opened the photo he'd zoomed from the dash cam. It was fuzzy, but Emma's pink dress and matted bear were visible. The first woman nodded. That's her. Something clicked inside him. A child who didn't cry, didn't speak, didn't smile. No bruises, no words, just silence and that devastating stillness. Ranger shifted again, let out a low sound, not quite a growl, more a breath drawn from deep in his chest. Watching. Ben sat there long after the women had left. Ranger's gaze locked on the door. Ben's mind spun through every policy, every line of red tape, every wait and see. The system required bruises, but Ranger saw pain before it bruised. He pulled his notebook from his jacket, scribbled something on the top line of a fresh page. This is not nothing. He flipped back to the photo from the dash cam. Then to a drawing he'd printed from a public child welfare resource. A sample image of the distress hand signal. Identical. And still, not enough. He leaned back, stared at the ceiling. The system had rules, but so did Ranger, and his were never wrong. They just didn't come with paperwork. Sunset Ridge looked different in the morning haze. Ben parked 2 blocks away this time, careful not to draw attention. The blue sedan was still there, unmoved, the same crooked angle like a bad habit. The morning dew hadn't even dried from the windshield. Whoever was inside hadn't left yet. Ranger sat beside him, ears perked, tail still. He wasn't whining, wasn't agitated. He was dialed in. "We're not walking the perimeter this time," Ben said softly. "Just eyes, nose, and whatever your gut tells you." Ranger blinked once. That was enough. They moved on foot, cutting behind the building. The dumpsters sat under a flickering security light, surrounded by broken furniture and the bitter stench of bleach and damp cardboard. Ranger slowed, sniffed the air, moved left. Then he stopped. Not like before. This wasn't the rigid alert stance. This was surgical, nose low, body angled, tracking a scent that didn't make sense to Ben, but clearly told a story to the dog. Ranger approached the corner of the dumpster, pawed once at a pile of trash bags that had been half torn open. "Easy," Ben murmured. Ranger nudged a balled-up grocery bag out of the way. Something crinkled, something blackened and curled. Ben crouched, pulling on latex gloves he always kept in his back pocket. He used a pen to lift the edge of what looked like paper, half burned but not consumed. It was a photograph. The edges were scorched, but the center remained. A woman smiling, sunlight catching her hair, holding a little girl. Emma. There was no doubt. Same eyes, same bear, same blankness, even in a place that should have been joyful. Ben's blood chilled. He turned over the next item Ranger was poring toward. A child's drawing. Crayons, smudged and ripped, like it had been crumpled and thrown out. Emma's name was scribbled in the corner, big block letters. The image, a little girl with yellow hair holding hands with a figure much larger than her. The girl had a sun above her, flowers below. The larger figure was colored entirely in red. Deep, angry red. His eyes were drawn in black circles, large and unblinking, with red lines slashing across them. The word bad repeated in shaky loops beneath his feet. Ben looked at Ranger. Ranger looked back. No bark, no whine, just a gaze that said, "I told you." Ben stepped back and took a deep breath. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. This wasn't a maybe. It was a signal, a cry, and it had been thrown out like garbage. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He answered instinctively. "Carter," came Lila Harmon's voice, flat with mourning. "I've got something." "Define something." "A burned photo and a child's drawing from a dumpster." "It's her. It's Emma." There was a pause. "Ben, that's not exactly admissible." "I'm not trying to build a case right now, Lila," he said, voice tightening. "I'm trying to stop one from happening." She exhaled. "Are you still outside the property?" "Yes." "Then don't go in." "I won't, not yet." He hung up. Ben looked around. The complex was still quiet. No signs of movement, no eyes in the windows. He took a photo of the drawing, then slipped it carefully into an evidence bag. Same with the scorched photo. Back in the patrol car, he set the items on the seat beside him. Ranger sat up straighter. "You knew it before I did," Ben said, staring at the photo. "Before anyone even looked at that girl, you saw her." Ranger gave a quiet grunt and turned back toward the window. Ben's hands tightened around the steering wheel. He couldn't do nothing. Not again. Images flickered in his head. Old cases. A girl found locked in a basement 3 weeks too late. A boy with a fractured arm because no one believed he wasn't clumsy. Ben had written reports back then, had played by the rules. Now, he was done playing with clocks. He started the engine and drove to the station. This time, he walked straight into the community liaison's office. Vanessa Mendez, early 40s, sharp eyes, quick hands. She'd spent 2 decades in child protective services before taking a quieter job with the department. "I need your eyes on something," Ben said, laying out the evidence. Vanessa looked at the drawing first. Her face didn't change, but her shoulders did. "How old is she?" 6. "Do you know her story? Only the version that doesn't talk?" Vanessa ran her fingers over the crayon lines. "You know what this is?" Ben waited. "This is a child trying to speak with no one to listen," she said. "And this," she tapped the word BAD, "isn't just fear. It's coded trauma. Look how she put herself in the corner. She didn't draw herself next to love. She drew herself beside danger." "I want a wellness check," Ben said. "Now." Vanessa nodded once. "Get me the address. I'll file it. But if the door doesn't open, we're stuck unless someone escalates." Ben didn't hesitate. "Then escalate me." As she made the calls, Ranger lay beside the chair, calm but unblinking, ears flicking with every movement behind the walls. An hour later, Ben was back in the car with Ranger. The photo sat on the dash, the drawing tucked inside his vest. The system might still be slow, but they weren't waiting anymore. This time, they had more than instinct. They had the first real sign, and they weren't going to miss the next. Alicia Mendez didn't blink as Ben laid out the crumpled drawing and burned photo on the cafe table between them. They sat in the back corner of Rosie's, away from the early lunch crowd. Ranger lay at Ben's feet, unusually alert, his chest rising and falling with a quiet tension. His eyes didn't leave the door. Alicia traced the edges of the drawing with a fingertip, careful not to tear it further. Her voice was soft but clipped. "This wasn't made for attention," she said. "This was made in secret. When a kid draws eyes like this..." She tapped the angry black circles. "They're not talking about imagination. They're talking about something real." Ben leaned forward. "You've seen this before?" She nodded once. "I worked child trauma response in Baltimore for 12 years. Kids don't always know how to say what happened, but their drawings do. Their dogs do too." Ranger lifted his head, just slightly, like he knew his name had entered the room without being spoken. Ben took a slow breath. "I need you to go in." Alicia raised an eyebrow. "You're not going in with me. If I knock, he'll see a badge. Might shut the door before you get a word in. But you're just a social worker doing a routine check. I'll stay close, but out of sight." She paused, reading him. "What's his name?" "Travis Beckett. Claims he's caring for the girl while the mother's away. No paperwork, no custody proof. And the girl's name, Emma. It doesn't show up in any local school system." Alicia nodded. "All right." She tucked the photo and drawing into her folder. "Give me 10 minutes. If I'm not out by then, or if anything feels wrong, you move." Ben touched her arm gently as she stood. "He's calculated, not reckless. If anything happens, it won't be loud. Just watch her eyes." Outside Sunset Ridge, the air was thick with mid-morning humidity. Alicia walked up the steps with the slow ease of someone who'd done this too many times to count. Professional. Unassuming. Ben stayed parked half a block down, engine off. Ranger sat tall in the back seat, his gaze locked on the second-floor unit like it owed him answers. 10 minutes, Ben thought. that's all. At minute 3, Ranger let out a low growl, soft, like thunder from miles off. At minute 6, he rose, paced once across the seat, then dropped to a crouch at the window, ears up, nose twitching. At minute 9, the door to Unit 2B cracked open. Alicia stepped out. Ben exhaled, but stopped when he saw her face. Her posture was steady, but her eyes were heavy. She didn't wave, didn't look around, just came down the steps at an even pace, her folder tucked tightly under one arm. Ben was already out of the car before she reached the sidewalk. Ranger followed, silent and close. Alicia didn't speak until they were both standing near the base of the stairwell. Her voice was low, but every word landed with weight. "She's in there," she said, alone with him. Ben's jaw clenched. "Did you see her?" She nodded. Briefly, she didn't say much, but her body language? She didn't move unless he moved. No toys, no books, no color in that apartment. Just one small corner with a blanket, a dented bowl of cereal, and the bear. She's scared? Scared isn't the right word. She's surrendered. Ben took a step back. Ranger pressed his body closer to Ben's leg. "I asked to see proof of custody," Alicia continued. "He said the mum dropped her off and hasn't come back. Said he didn't have any paperwork, but that she's safe. Said Emma's quiet by nature." Ben spat on the sidewalk. "Did you believe him?" "I believed he wanted me to." She looked at Ben, voice tight. "We need to pull her, soon. She's not being physically hurt, not yet. But emotionally, she's disappearing." Ranger growled again, soft but unmistakable. Ben nodded. "We file now?" Alicia already had her phone in hand. "We get the paperwork started, but I'll need you when we go back in. This won't be a walk away peacefully kind of visit." Ben looked back at the apartment. The second-floor window, the gap in the blinds. Emma's face wasn't there, but Ranger was still staring, still waiting, still hearing what no one else could. And Ben made the quietest vow of his life. Next time, they wouldn't leave without her. The air outside Unit 2B was so still it felt wrong. Ben stood beside Alicia Mendez and Officer Julie McNair, who had joined them for backup. All three wore plain clothes, but their purpose was unmistakable. Alicia held the signed protective custody order in one hand, her ID clipped to her blouse. Ben kept one hand on Ranger's lead. The dog was steady but alert, the tension in his body radiating outward like a coiled wire. He hadn't barked, he hadn't moved, but he knew they weren't here to knock politely anymore. Ben nodded to Alicia. She stepped forward, rapped 3 times, firm and even. "Mr. Beckett, this is Alicia Mendez with Child Protective Services. We are here under legal authority with a court-ordered wellness intervention regarding a minor in your care." Silence. Then, behind the door, the slow creak of footsteps, the faint jingle of a chain sliding free. When the door opened, Travis Beckett looked smaller than Ben remembered. His hair was damp, shirt half-tucked, the kind of disheveled that didn't come from rushing, but from unraveling. His eyes flicked from Alicia to Ben, then to Ranger. He flinched slightly at the sight of the dog. "What now?" he asked, voice hoarse. "I need to see Emma," Alicia said. "Now." "She's asleep," he replied automatically. "It's not a good time." "Now," Ben said, stepping forward. His voice wasn't loud, but it left no room for negotiation. Travis exhaled through his nose, then stepped aside. The apartment smelled like bleach, old takeout, and something sourer underneath. The furniture was sparse, a couch with torn cushions, a small table, no TV. The hallway was dim, the bedroom door closed. "She's in there," Travis muttered, nodding. Ben turned to Alicia. "You want me to go in first?" She shook her head. "Let me try." Ranger stayed by Ben's side, his body tight but unmoving, as Alicia gently opened the bedroom door and slipped inside. For a beat, nothing. Then the soft creak of floorboards. Alicia's voice, barely audible. "Hi, sweetheart. My name is Alicia. I'm here to make sure you're okay. Is it all right if I come in?" A pause. Then the door opened wider. Ben didn't mean to move, but his feet carried him forward before he could stop himself. Ranger stepped with him, silent as a shadow. Emma was curled up in the corner of the small room, her back to the wall, arms wrapped around the same threadbare teddy bear. The room had no real furniture, just a mattress on the floor and a single blanket. Her eyes met Ranger's first. For a second, everything in her face stayed empty. Then something flickered. Recognition. Her fingers loosened slightly on the bear. Ranger took a slow step forward. Then another. He didn't rush, didn't push. He sat a few feet from her and tilted his head. Emma's voice, when it came, was almost too soft to hear. "You saw me, didn't you?" The room froze. Even Alicia's breath hitched. Ben swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. Ranger let out a small exhale through his nose and lowered his head to the floor. Emma crawled forward just enough to reach him. Her small hand landed gently on Ranger's muzzle. Her fingers trembled but didn't pull away. "I thought no one saw," she whispered, "but you did." Alicia knelt beside her, voice warm and gentle. "Yes, he saw you, and now we're here." Emma didn't speak again, but her body leaned forward, resting against Ranger's fur like she'd finally found a place that held warmth. Ben turned to Travis, who stood just outside the doorway. "Do you have any legal documentation that gives you custody?" "I told you," Travis muttered. "Her mom left her with me. Said she needed a few days. That was weeks ago. I didn't ask for this." Alicia stood slowly. "And you didn't call anyone when she didn't come back?" "She said she'd be back. She didn't come back." Ben's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "You should have reported it. You should have done something." Travis didn't respond. "We're taking her into protective custody," Alicia said. "You're not under arrest, but you're no longer her guardian. If the mother is found and verified to be fit, the court will determine reunification. Until then, you're not to have any contact." Travis rubbed a hand over his face, eyes glassy. "I didn't hurt her." "But you didn't help her either," Alicia said. "That matters." Back outside, the light felt too bright, too honest. Emma walked slowly, her hand still gripping the bear, her other resting lightly on Ranger's back. Ben held the car door open, and Ranger jumped in first, settling himself so that Emma could sit beside him. She didn't cry, but her shoulders dropped the moment the door shut. Alicia slid into the front seat and turned toward Ben. "We'll find the mum. Start there." Ben nodded, staring through the windshield. "You saw her face. That wasn't just fear. That was erasure." Ranger looked up at him, then back at Emma. Ben placed his hand gently on Ranger's back. "You brought her back," he whispered, "before any of us did." Emma rested her head on Ranger's shoulder, and for the first time since she appeared in his world, she closed her eyes. Safe, the shelter sat at the end of a quiet street in northern Pine Grove, tucked between a church with sun-faded stained glass and an abandoned laundromat that had become more storage shed than business. No signs, no flash, just a plain brick building with a secured entryway and a buzzer that barely worked. Ben and Alicia stood in front of it under a sky smeared with grey clouds. Ranger was at Ben's side, vest off, but still watchful. He wasn't just here for support. He was here because the moment this woman opened the door, Ben wanted her to see the one who saw her daughter first. Inside the lobby, a woman in scrubs led them to a modest sitting room. Beige walls, laminate flooring, a few mismatched chairs. A faint scent of lavender and institutional coffee hung in the air. "She's nervous." the staffer said in a whisper. She's been here 3 weeks, came in under a fake name, didn't even give her real birthday at first. Took time to open up. Ben nodded. He understood. Sometimes survival meant being forgettable. The door opened slowly. Jenna Monroe stepped in with hesitation carved into every movement. Early 30s, slender, blonde hair tied in a low ponytail. Her sweatshirt was too big, sleeves pulled over trembling hands. Her face had that translucent quality that came from living too long in flight mode. Tired eyes, faint bruises under skin that hadn't seen sleep. But there was something else, too. Recognition. Her eyes locked onto Ranger first, then Ben, then Alicia. "You're the officer," she said quietly. Ben nodded. "Sergeant Ben Carter. And this is Alicia Mendez with Child Protective Services." She sat without being asked, clutching her fingers together like a lifeline. Her voice was small, but she didn't mumble. She'd rehearsed this, maybe for weeks. "I didn't abandon her," she said. "I left her to keep her alive." Alicia gave her space to speak. Jenna's eyes watered, but she didn't break. "His name was Marcus. He wasn't Emma's dad. He came into our lives when she was 2. I thought he was kind. I thought he was safety." Ben didn't interrupt. He let her walk her own path to the truth. The control came slow. First the phone, then my job, then friends, then bruises I could cover. The worst part wasn't when he hit me. It was when he stopped pretending he wouldn't. She looked down at her hands. "I tried to leave. Twice. The second time he found me. Told me if I ever tried again, he'd take Emma and I'd never see her again. That was when I made the decision. I packed everything I could carry in 5 minutes. But I couldn't take her. Not with nowhere to go. Not with him watching." Alicia spoke gently. "So you left her with Travis Beckett." He was our neighbor. Quiet. Strange, but he never raised his voice. Never had guests. Never drank. I thought it would be for 2 days. I thought I could get somewhere safe and come back. But Marcus, I saw his car outside the shelter the first night. I saw it again the next town over. I thought he was tracking me. Ben leaned forward. "Did he ever contact Travis?" Jenna shook her head. "I don't know. I called Travis once, from a payphone behind a gas station. I told him I'd be back. But after that, I couldn't risk calling again. I didn't even know if she was still there. I didn't even know if she was safe." "She's safe now," Alicia said. Jenna's shoulders crumpled. She covered her mouth, a muffled sob breaking free. Then her eyes locked onto Ranger again. "She said the dog saw her," Jenna whispered. "She said the dog knew." Ranger stepped closer, then sat beside her. He didn't move otherwise, just offered his presence. Jenna reached out slowly, brushing his fur with the edge of her hand. "Thank you," she said to him, more than to anyone else in the room. Ben finally spoke. "You can see her, but it'll be in a monitored setting first, for her safety, and yours. There will be steps, but the hardest part is over." Jenna nodded. "I'll do whatever they ask. I'll go to court. I'll prove I can be stable again. I'll go through counseling. I just want my daughter back." Alicia gently took her hand. "You made a mistake, but you also made a choice that may have saved her life. And that matters." They left the shelter with the echo of that sentence ringing in the air. Back in the car, Ranger lay in the back seat, head resting on the armrest between them. Ben glanced at Alicia. "Do you believe her?" Alicia looked out the window for a long second. "I do, and I think Emma will too." Ben didn't reply right away. He looked at Ranger in the rearview mirror. "She waited," he said, "and she still believed her mum would come." "She wasn't wrong," Alicia answered. That night, Ben sat at his kitchen table with the case file open and the photo Emma had drawn tucked inside the folder. Next to it sat a new report. Jenna Monroe, located. Story consistent with high-risk domestic flight. Verified history of emotional and physical abuse. No current contact with former partner. He added a note at the bottom in pen. She ran to protect her daughter, not from her. Ranger walked over and sat beside him, placing his head on Ben's knee. You knew she wasn't gone. Ben whispered. You knew Emma wasn't just another lost case. Ranger blinked, slow and steady, and for the first time in weeks, Ben let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The room at the Child Services Center was painted in warm pastels, filled with soft toys and overstuffed furniture that tried to make the space feel less like a government facility and more like a second chance. Emma sat on a small beanbag chair, her favorite bear clutched tight to her chest. She wore a pale yellow hoodie that hung slightly off one shoulder, and her hair was neatly brushed back, thanks to Alicia's careful hands that morning. But her eyes, they were still watchful, still wary. Ben stood near the doorway with Ranger sitting patiently beside him, sensing the shift in the air before anyone else. The dog's ears perked, his tail gave a slow wag. The door opened. Jenna Monroe stepped in, arms at her sides, face drawn but composed. She didn't move quickly. She didn't reach out. She just stood there, letting her daughter see her. Emma blinked. Once. Twice. Then she whispered, Mum. Jenna dropped to her knees, tears already falling. Emma! She breathed. I'm here. I didn't forget you. I never forgot. The little girl stood slowly, like something fragile unfolding. She took one hesitant step forward, then another, and then she ran. Jenna caught her in mid-sob, arms wrapping around the small body with a strength she didn't know she still had. The room held its breath. Ranger padded forward and gently nudged Emma's side, then licked her hand. Emma turned and placed her other arm around his neck. You helped find her. She whispered into his fur. You saw me first. Ben looked away for a moment, swallowing hard. There was no speech, no official formality, just the sound of a child's sobs against her mother's heartbeat, and a dog who had held the thread between them when everything else fell away. After a few minutes, Alicia gently knelt beside them. Jenna? She said softly. We'll start the supervised visitation plan today. There'll be more steps before full custody, but this is the beginning. Jenna nodded, still holding Emma. Whatever it takes. Later, in the hallway, Ben leaned against the wall as Jenna signed a temporary placement form. He watched through the small window as Ranger lay on the rug beside Emma, who now played with wooden blocks while humming softly, something she hadn't done since that night in the dark apartment. I didn't expect this, Jenna said beside him, not looking up from the form. Ben raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect what? That anyone would still believe me, that she'd still want me, that a dog would be the reason all this even came to light. Ben smiled faintly. Sometimes it just takes one set of honest eyes. As they left, Ben handed Ranger a small rubber toy he kept in his coat pocket. The dog didn't play often, but today he gave it a half-hearted chew before setting it at Emma's feet. For you, Ben said to Emma. She picked it up like it was made of glass. I'll keep it in my backpack, next to my bear. The next week brought a flood of change. CPS fast-tracked the psychological evaluations, and a trauma specialist began working with both Jenna and Emma in tandem. The story, now confirmed, cast new light on the choices Jenna had made. While reckless, they were grounded in a desperate need to survive. Meanwhile, Travis Beckett became the subject of a deeper investigation. There were no formal charges, yet. No concrete evidence of abuse or neglect. But the circumstances surrounding Emma's condition, her isolation, and Beckett's reluctance to speak to authorities left enough concern to issue a no-contact order. His teaching license was suspended pending inquiry, and the school board convened to review any other behavioral red flags. In the press, no names were released, but the local news whispered of a mystery child saved by a military dog, and a mother once lost to fear now fighting to rebuild. One morning, as Ben sat on the porch with a mug of coffee and Ranger stretched out beside him on the cool concrete, the mail arrived. Among the bills and newsletters was a small white envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter. Sergeant Carter, I don't know how to thank someone who gave me back my life without asking for anything in return. You didn't just see a file. You didn't just see a girl on paper. You saw what your dog saw, and that saved us. I'll never forget that Ranger was the first one who truly saw my daughter when no one else was looking. With gratitude that words can't cover, Jenna Monroe. Ben folded the letter carefully and slid it into a drawer he kept for the things that mattered. Not medals, not case files, just the quiet truths. He looked at Ranger, who tilted his head in that way dogs do when they already know what you're thinking. You're more than a partner. Ben murmured, You're the compass. Ranger closed his eyes, tail thumping once, satisfied. And somewhere in town, a mother and daughter sat across from each other in a shared apartment with mismatched furniture, eating cereal from paper bowls, rebuilding one morning at a time. The early spring sunlight filtered through the budding oaks surrounding Meadowbrook Elementary. The playground buzzed with laughter, the kind that rises and falls in waves, unfiltered, full of small joys. On a bench near the chain-link fence, Ben sat with Ranger at his feet, leash draped loosely over one knee. Emma's class had just come out for recess. She was taller now, or maybe it was just the way she held herself. Chin up, shoulders back, confidence blooming like the flowers behind her. The familiar stuffed bear poked out of her backpack, worn but still whole. When she spotted Ranger, her face lit up, and she ran over without hesitation. Hey, buddy, she said, kneeling to hug Ranger. He leaned in with a slow, contented tail wag and a soft huff through his nose, like an old friend saying, You're doing okay. Ben watched quietly as Emma nestled against the dog's side for a moment. You still sleep with your bear? He asked, gently. Emma nodded. He guards my dreams. A whistle blew across the yard, signaling free play. Emma gave Ranger one last pat and skipped back to the monkey bars. Ranger settled down again, eyes half closed but alert. His nose twitched. Always listening, Ben reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a photocopy of a thank you card Emma had drawn 2 months ago. A stick figure labeled Me held hands with another labeled Mom, and beside them stood a large brown dog with a glowing yellow heart drawn on its chest. It read, Thank you for finding us. He'd looked at it every morning since. A group of second graders darted by, giggling, and Ben nodded to a nearby teacher. All seemed fine, until Ranger moved. It was subtle, head lifting, ears pricking forward, his whole body focused, frozen for 1 second. Then he rose, not like a dog eager to play, but like a soldier reporting for duty. Ben followed his gaze. Across the playground, a little girl stood near the fence line. Brown hair, pigtails tied with fraying ribbon. Her feet were planted stiffly, arms at her sides. Her classmates bounced around her, unaware. But she wasn't moving. And then, her right hand lifted. 2 fingers crossed, subtle, hesitant. The silent SOS signal. Ranger began to walk, slow and steady, straight toward her. Ben's pulse quickened. He rose and followed, alert. When he reached the girl, she flinched slightly. Ben knelt, keeping his voice soft. Hey there, I'm Ben. This is Ranger. Can I sit with you a second? The girl nodded almost imperceptibly. Ranger, without command, eased closer and rested his head gently against her leg. It didn't take long. The teacher came, the counselor was called, and within 20 minutes that little girl, Jasmine, was sitting inside with a staff member, revealing bruises no one had seen, telling truths no one had heard. Later, as the principal walked Ben back toward the parking lot, she shook her head in quiet awe. If your dog hadn't noticed, we might have missed it again. Ben didn't answer. He just glanced down at Ranger, who looked up as if to say, I just do my job. That night, back at home, Ben stood in front of the refrigerator. On it hung magnets shaped like bones and stars, and one small photo of Emma hugging Ranger the day they were reunited. Next to it, he placed a new magnet, freshly printed from his home office. In simple, bold lettering, it read, Never ignore a silent cry. Ranger never does. He stepped back, arms crossed, quiet. The dog padded up beside him, sat down, and nudged his hand. Ben smiled. One day you'll retire, he said softly. But not today. Ranger wagged once, slow and certain. As the screen door creaked open and the last light of dusk settled over the porch, Ben knew this chapter had closed. But there would always be others, and for some kids the difference between a wound ignored and a life changed was a dog who never looked away. What about you? What's your story with a loyal pet? If Ranger's story moved you, or reminded you of a bond you once had, or still have, share it in the comments. And if you believe in second chances, silent heroes, and the power of a single act of kindness, support our channel, because somewhere out there, another Ranger is waiting.